How's it going, everyone? We are excited to dive in today to our business attraction webinar. We want to thank you guys for taking time out of your day. We know March Madness is going on, and you're probably looking forward to get back to watching that Michigan State game. So we really appreciate you guys taking the time out. My name is Nathan Foss. I am an account executive here at Lightcast. So I work with government organizations all across the country, and I help them understand the data in their community and help them utilize that data to make these data-driven decisions for business attraction, business retention expansion, and a variety of other use cases. With me today, I also have my colleague Dalal, and I'm going to let her introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Gazelle, and I am an account manager here at Lightcast, also managing EDOs across the states. Yes, we're excited to do this today.
Awesome, thanks, Dalal. So we're gonna dive right in here. We have a lot to cover. Today we're gonna be going through three of our primary tools that we utilize for business attraction. And so some of you may be familiar with one or two of these tools, but hopefully you get something out of this today, and hopefully you learn a little bit about how we actually use these tools for business attraction. So the three tools that we're going to be diving into are the Gazelle platform, the developer platform, and then a relatively new one to us, eIMPACT. These three tools all kind of serve different use cases in business attraction, but we can really start to pull from each one to help us with these different sections of business attraction. So, as you guys are probably familiar, there's obviously different types of business attraction. When we talk about business attraction, we can talk about proactive business attraction, actually going out, targeting these companies and trying to convince them to expand into your region. We also have what I would probably call something like reactive business attraction or RFI response. Really looking for these RFIs from companies or responding to them when you receive them to provide information on your workforce and on your region. We're going to be kind of looking at both sides of this today, but primarily we're going to be focusing on the more of the proactive business attraction side of things. So we're going to kind of dive in here a little bit more. The Gazelle tool is really focused on targeting these businesses. This is a business intelligence tool that is really focused towards business attraction. So it's not only giving you information, high level information on the businesses, but it's giving you information that's really targeted towards how can I get this company to come to my area? Or how do I even know what the right companies are to target? So we're going to dive into that. And then step two, we're going to be looking at the developer platform. Developer is a labor market information research tool that can help you better understand what do you have in your workforce? What makes your region special that would make these businesses want to come to your area? So we're going to use developer for that. And then the last thing here, eIMPACT, is really how do we market our region now? We know the data, we know what industries we're trying to target for our region. How do we actually get that data out there? And so eIMPACT is utilizing a public facing dashboard to show what's important about your region, show what makes your region special. So we'll dive into all three of these today, and then I'm going to kind of touch high level on the tools, and then I'm going to pass it over back to Dalal, and she's going to actually talk about some specific clients that utilize these tools in their work. So step one, Gazelle. How are we actually finding these companies? What companies should we be targeting? How do we even figure out where to start, right? So there's a number of different ways the Gazelle platform is utilized. Obviously, business attraction, business retention are really big. Being able to look outside of our region and identify specific companies to bring in, but also potentially being able to look internally and say, who do we have in our region that we might be able to work to expand? We've all heard the stats that 70% of job growth is coming from companies within your own region. So really being able to look internally and externally at these businesses. You can also use this to research these companies. So we have that step two there, research and analysis. Once you know what companies you want to target, you probably want to know something about those companies. Obviously we can easily identify what industry is a company in, but maybe you want to see have these companies been in the news lately? Maybe we want to see, have they grown? What does their international presence look like? All of these different things are things that we probably want to know before we bring a company into our region. Event planning, or what we could look at as trade shows here. How can we utilize Gazelle to help us prepare for trade shows and help us make sure we're getting the most value out of these conferences or trade shows that we're going to? And then the last thing is actually making strategic action plans. So taking that action, not just having a plan, but actually taking action with it. So we really want to be able to provide steps and provide the resources you need to actually go out and actively bring in these companies to your region. So one of the main points in Gazelle, one of the main features here is what we call the company finder. The company finder is essentially designed to help you find these companies. This is a global data set. So we're looking at companies all across the world. We can identify companies in Canada that might be interested in moving to the US or vice versa. Or we could start looking over in Asia or Europe to identify companies that maybe we want to target for foreign direct investment. Lots of different ways we can do this. You can see we're pulling in roughly 10 million different companies into our database. And there's a lot of different ways we can start to filter down these companies to get really down to the companies that we want to attract. Because there's a lot of companies out there. You can't target all of them. So how can we start to narrow this down? Well, step one, we start to narrow it down for you by pulling in only traded industries. We're not necessarily interested in local grocery stores or, local mechanics. Those are great companies and they're vital to our regions, but they're also probably not the types of companies that you're looking to go target in your business attraction strategy. You're looking for those tech companies, those manufacturing companies. There's a wide variety of examples of companies that you want to target to bring into your region to fill supply chain gaps or really create economic prosperity for your people. So that's kind of step one of how we narrow it down, and we do that step for you. As you can see, what I have here, there's a lot of other filters on this screen. I'm going to kind of dive into a few of them here, but obviously there's some basic ways we can start. We can filter down by NAICS codes, by what industry these companies fall into. We can filter it down by things like clusters. We bring in the US cluster mapping project, so those Harvard clusters, to help us identify what companies are falling into those different clusters. Um, but one of the big ones that people utilize is the keyword search. And the reason we use keywords is because NAICS codes don't always capture businesses the way that we actually see them in the real world. When we talk about things like cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, clean technology, all of these are very important like industry sectors that people are trying to target to bring to their region, but none of them actually fall under a NAICS code. Cybersecurity is something that can technically fall into a wide variety of industries. In fact, most industries have some sort of cybersecurity in their company. But if we're trying to target companies that specialize in cybersecurity, how can we find those companies without using the NAICS code? Well, one of the ways we do it is through the keyword search. We can start to narrow down these companies based on what is their description? What is the description of their company? We can see, what do these companies specialize in? What is it like? Maybe cybersecurity is even in the name of the company, as we can see on some of these. How can we start to find those cybersecurity companies? We can also start to narrow this down more by region. There's a lot of different ways we can dive into where these companies are. We break out our companies, all of their locations, so we can even see the different, like where they headquartered, where their subsidiaries and branches, different things like that. So that is something that can be very valuable if you're trying to target companies from a specific area. Like I mentioned earlier, foreign direct investment. Maybe you have specific countries that you're trying to target for your foreign direct investment like initiatives. We can target those specific countries, or we can even say, I want to look at companies that are headquartered somewhere else, but they currently have a subsidiary or branch in my region. Maybe we can start to look at bringing in another branch or expanding the current branch. A lot of different ways we can utilize that map feature to help us narrow down the companies that we're looking at. We can also start to drill down by which companies are growing. So the next step here we did was we looked at the G score or the growth score. This is essentially designed to help us find what companies are potentially going to be growing. And so the G score is on a ranking system from 1 to 5, one being the least likely to grow based on the indicators and the data that we have on this company, the industry, the region they're in. There's a lot of different metrics that we pull in to help us identify that. 5 is the most likely to grow. So 5 would be we're seeing a lot of indications that this company is growing very quickly, or that this is a very strong industry. Maybe they recently received some funding, whatever it might be, these companies are quickly growing. So though that 1 to 5 range can be a great place to start for identifying companies that are quickly growing. As you can see here, I also have G score 6. So that's kind of the next level above 5. But what that means is we have actually talked to this company and they've told us that they are actively looking at an expansion project. So they usually provide us with some additional information on that. And they'll even tell us some things like what they're looking for, what type of space they're needing, how many jobs it's going to create, what their timeline is for the expansion project. And then they'll even usually tell us where are they looking to expand to. Most companies have some idea of what country they're looking to go to, or even maybe what part of a country they're looking to go to. So here's an example of a verified project. So you can see it's that 6G score. That's how we know that it's one of our verified projects. But this is giving us a little bit more information on this company and their project. So this about section, this is actually them telling us a little bit about their company, but also this specific project. How much are they investing? How many jobs is it going to create? So we can see here, this one is probably going to create somewhere between 1 to 25 jobs. They're on a 2 to 3 year timeline, and they're actually looking at they're like moving their headquarters. So sometimes we'll see this be a production facility. Sometimes we'll see this be office space, but in this case, they're looking for a new headquarters for their business. So that right there is kind of a high level overview of the Gazelle tool. Really focused on that business data. It really helps us identify what companies we want to go after, what companies we want to pull into our region. The next step, step 2, is the developer platform. So now that we know those companies, how do we actually get them to come to our area, right? So we want to tell the story of our region. We want to identify what are those regional metrics that we can show that make our region look better than other regions. We've heard from so many different companies and we've seen it on so many different RFIs. One of the most important things to these companies is understanding, do these regions have the workforce to support our company? Obviously, there's a lot of other things that go into a business's decision on where they go, but we've heard the number one is that talent supply, that workforce. Do you have the workforce availability to support their company? And it even goes a little bit deeper than that because being able to show that you have the occupations currently in your region, that's great and that's important. But a lot of companies are starting to dive even deeper into that and say, does this region not only have the workers, but do they have the skills to support our business? There's obviously a lot of different skills that job seekers or employees can have that employers need to fit their business. And so that's one of the things that we can also use developer for is identifying what is the skill set of the workforce in your region, not necessarily just who are the like what are the occupations there. So, when we talk about our regional metrics, there's a lot of different things we can start to dive into. Companies are obviously always interested in things like quality of life. What does the quality of life look like in your region? What does the cost of living look like in your region? These are important metrics on the talent side, right? Because again, if the company is needing talent, they're not only going to be looking at what talent do you have right now, but what is the likelihood that you're going to be able to continue bringing new talent into your region? Whether that be through education providers. Maybe you have colleges or universities in your area that are pumping out graduates. Are you able to keep those graduates in your area? If you have a lower cost of living and a high quality of life, you might have a higher likelihood of keeping graduates in your own area. Um, or are you able to attract workers from nearby areas? Maybe you're in a smaller community that's outside of a major metro. Those are very quickly growing areas, as we know. Especially, we saw that trend during COVID. We saw a lot of people leaving the major metros, going to these smaller communities. You can utilize that to your advantage. You can start to show the migration patterns and say, look, in the last few years, our region has really started to grow. And we can even start to see, where is it growing? What are the occupations that are growing in our area? What are the demographics of the people that are growing in our area? And these are really important metrics for a business to understand on your region. We can even start to identify, what are our targets, right? So when we're looking at doing this targeted business attraction, one of the most important things is understanding, what do we currently have in our area? What is the current makeup of our industries? Which industries are growing, which ones are declining, which ones are we most specialized in? I'm sure a lot of you have heard of location quotient or concentration. Very important metric there for understanding, how specialized is this industry in your region. Or another metric that I won't dive too much into today is called shift share. Um, Shift share is a great metric for showing how competitive you are compared to the nation. And so it's showing, how much are you growing despite national growth. So you might have, a tech industry in your region, and tech is growing nationally. We know that, but maybe it's growing quicker in your region than it is at the national level. That's something that businesses want to know, and it's something that you really need to understand when you're targeting businesses, because again, you have to make sure that you're targeting the right businesses for your region. You want to make sure you're targeting the businesses that are going to be a good fit for your region. Staffing patterns is a really powerful tool for understanding what workforce a company might need. A lot of times, when you are targeting these companies, they might not necessarily tell you, and a lot of times they might not necessarily know what occupations they need to support their business. And so we can utilize the staffing patterns to say, hey, these are the occupations that are typically like associated with this industry. We can see what percent of the industry they make up. We can see things like typical entry level education. So, what is that educational attainment that is needed for these occupations to support this business? You can even see things here like work experience required or typical on the job training. These are all important metrics that you need to understand for your workforce to help support these businesses. And the more you can start to demonstrate this to these businesses, the more confidence they're going to have in your region, because they're going to see that, oh, they really understand their numbers, and they're really demonstrating that they have the workforce, the current workforce, and hopefully the incoming workforce to support our business. Once you've identified those occupations that are required for this industry or for this specific company, it's great to understand, what does that occupation actually currently look like in our region. And so we can utilize a lot of our different occupational reports. In this case here, we have the occupation snapshot to understand, what's the data showing for this occupation. We can see, how many jobs do we currently have in our region for this occupation. We can see, what does our compensation look like. How does that compare against the national average? Because again, that's a very important metric for these businesses. They want to understand, what is the cost of doing business in your region. Again, there's a lot of things that go into that. We can dive into the tax side of it and say, what are the taxes in my state, or maybe even local taxes, and how does that compare to other regions that they might potentially be looking at. But compensation obviously plays a huge role in this. How much are they going to have to pay my, in this case, support engineers? And how does that compare against other regions that they might be looking at? We can even start to dive into things like local demand through job postings and understanding, what are other employers in the region looking for? Are they looking for not only the same occupations, but maybe they're looking for the same skill sets that I am? So what is my competition for workforce going to be in the region? And is there a gap in the region that my company might be able to come and fill to pull in these workers that maybe there's an overrepresentation of in a given region? We also have things like the graduate pipeline you can see on there. The graduate pipeline is a really powerful tool for understanding what is the incoming supply of workers going to be for this occupation. Um, so we do this utilizing what we call a SIP to SOC crosswalk, or an occupation to program crosswalk. And essentially, we're identifying what different programs people are graduating from and what are the occupations that they will typically end up working in if they graduate from that program. And so, some of them are very obvious. If you graduate with a degree in mechanical engineering, you're probably going to end up as a mechanical engineer. But that's not always the case. A lot of people that graduate in that degree in mechanical engineering, there's a wide variety of jobs that they can actually work in, and they don't always end up as a mechanical engineer. So, understanding what programs can lead to what occupations can be really valuable information, not only for you, but again, for the businesses that might be interested in moving to your region. Last thing I want to touch on here, because I think it's a really important data set, is the place of work versus place of residence data. So understanding what do the commuting patterns look like in your region? Are you an area that is typically gaining workforce from outside of the area? Do you have a lot of inbound commuters? Or are you losing workers to other regions outside? Honestly, it's not necessarily bad whichever one you are, because both can be utilized in your business attraction strategy. If you're a community that has a lot of inbound commuters, you can show that to businesses and say, look, we not only have the workers in our area, but we're actually able to pull workers in from surrounding areas too. We have an increased supply of workers because we can pull from all of these surrounding communities, and that really increases our potential workforce. If you're on the other side of this and you are the community that's losing workers to a nearby area, that's just as good or better, because you can show that to businesses and say, hey, look, we have these support engineers currently commuting out of our region to this nearby city. They're having to commute 30 minutes to work every day. If you come locate in our area, you can probably get those workers to stay and work in the same area that they live instead of having to commute out every day for work. It's a very, very valuable tool for convincing businesses that you have the workforce that they need. Um, and we're able to look at that data both at the broader community level and see overall what the commuting patterns look like. But we can also dive into it by specific occupation. And we can say, where are my registered nurses living versus where are they working? Where are my software engineers living versus where are they working? And so you can really get it very specific, not only the overall commuting patterns, but you can target it down and say, these are the occupations that you would need, and this is what their commuting patterns look like in our region. The last thing here I wanted to touch on developer is the profile analytics data set. Now, this is data that's coming from a variety of online social profiles that we're pulling in to help us get a much deeper dive into our workforce than you can get through the traditional labor market information sources. So, when I say traditional labor market sources, I'm talking about things like the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the Census Bureau, the Bureau of Economic Analysis. They're all very powerful and very valuable data sets, but there's a lot they don't see. Now, step one is they're obviously very lagged data sets. Typically, if you're looking at a Census Bureau data set, it's going to be 1 or 2 years lagged, which sometimes isn't that big of a deal because some regions don't change that much year over year. But as we know, over the past 5 years, we've seen drastic changes. Obviously, we had the COVID pandemic that made huge changes to our workforce. We saw people leaving, like I mentioned earlier, we saw people leaving big cities and going to smaller communities. We saw huge changes in what occupations and what industries people were working in. And so there was a couple of years there where Census Bureau data was kind of useless because it was too outdated to really help us understand what is our workforce, what's going on in our workforce right now. And so the profile analytics data set can help us get around that because we can see as people update their profiles, We update this data much more regularly than, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the Census Bureau. We can see as they update their profiles what jobs people are working in, what companies are they working for. So we can get much more in depth than specifically than just saying what industry are they in. We can now say what company are they in, what company are they working for. But the most important thing here is we can say, what skills do they have? We break this out by specialized skills and common skills. So we can really start to see both sides of this picture and see, what are those specialized skills that my workforce has? And not even necessarily looking maybe at the broader workforce, but maybe we want to understand what are the specific skills that support engineers have. And so you can see in this example, we've narrowed this down not only to a specific region, but to specific occupation. And we're seeing what are the skills that these occupations have in our region. We can also dive into the certifications and qualifications of our workers, and we can see what are those certifications that our workforce has and what types of companies are hiring for those types of certifications. That can help you identify what companies across the country or across the globe you might want to attract to your region, because maybe you have a high percentage of workers with a CompTIA security certification. That's really important information. That's important information for you to have, because that can help you identify what companies you could bring into your area that are looking for that type of certification. So now I want to dive into part three here, eIMPACT. We've now identified what companies we want to attract on the proactive side. We've now seen in developer how we can, what types of data do we want to show these companies to convince them to come to our region? Or what types of data can we start to utilize in our RFI response? Um, Now, this side of it is really making sure that you can inform these companies and that these companies can get information on your region without having to do any crazy deep dives, maybe without even having to reach out to you. Because you have to realize that for every company that is reaching out to you to get information or data on your region, there's probably two or three companies that were somewhat interested in your region, but they just never reached out to get the data. So if they can easily get this information on your area, if they can see this directly on your website without having to send an email to info@cityname.com, instead of that, they should just be able to get it right on your website, and they should be able to understand if this is a good region, if this region is a good fit for them right off the bat. And again, if you put your best foot forward and you say, this is what makes my area special, this is what my workforce looks like, this is what my educational attainment and demographics look like in my region, you can really get a head start on other regions that are also potentially looking at bringing in companies to their area. So, a lot of different things we can start to bring in here. Now, one thing I always like to mention is this is very much fed by Lightcast data. We can pull in all of this data that we saw on the developer platform into these dashboards, but they're also custom dashboards. So we can actually pull in other sources as well. For instance, we pull in a lot of housing information for people. A lot of times people will want to show what do their housing prices look like in their area? How has that changed over time? Or what are the different types of construction that have been happening in my area? Is it residential construction? Is it industrial? You know, these are the kind of things that people often want to know about a given region. So we can start to aggregate both these Lightcast data sets as well as these external data sets to really show what it makes your region special. Maybe you have one of the top farmers markets across the country. Believe it or not, that's kind of important information for a lot of people. When we're talking about talent attraction, that quality of life standard can be really valuable to be able to show on your website and can help bring in new talent, which in turn can help bring in new businesses. So I wanted to kind of show a live example here. We were going to actually do a screen share, and I was going to walk through all of these different tools, but we decided we didn't have enough time to really do it justice going into each of the three tools. And I never trust my Wi-Fi. I was just 100% sure that if I tried sharing my screen, something would go wrong. So we decided to just do the screenshots. But um, this was one live example that we love showing. This is the Dallas Regional Chamber. They've created this really great dashboard to highlight the healthcare and IT industries in their region. And so, people, this is a public dashboard. You can go to this, you can check it out, but you can start to dive into which industry are you wanting to see. And then the second category there, that the second selection, it asks, what is your role or what is your interest? And whichever one you select is actually going to change the data that you see. Um, and it's going to show you different data sets depending on what role you select. Some of them, it might be the same data sets, but it might be presented differently because an education and training admin might care about different things than a policymaker. Or maybe they care about the same things, but they just understand them a little bit differently. So we built this custom dashboard to really help show people the healthcare and IT industry in the Dallas region. Excuse me. So you can see here are some live examples from this dashboard. There's a lot of different ways that you can start to filter down and play with the data. So we didn't really want to just give a high level overview of the region and say, hey, jobs have grown in the Dallas area. Everyone kind of already knew that, right? And so we didn't want to give information that they didn't know. We wanted them to be able to dive into the specifics that they wouldn't maybe be able to get anywhere else. And you can see here that we have things like the job trends over time, but you can narrow this down by specific occupations within the industry. You can see things like educational attainment or demographics or program and educational information to see what do the completions look like in my area? How has that changed over time? Are they growing? Are they declining? Same thing on the skills side. We can see the skills over time and see how that has changed and see where have we seen growth for demand of specific skills in our area, or maybe where have we seen a decline? So now I'm going to pass it over to Dalal, and she's going to kind of dive into some of our specific use cases for a few different clients that we've kind of highlighted for this.
Perfect. Hi again, everyone. So I'm sure you all learned a lot from Nathan, but now to dive into looking at the use cases. So first of all, at Lightcast, our account managers are dedicated to closely collaborating and working with all our clients with onboarding, training, and making sure you really get the most out of every single one of our tools. So to begin with looking at Gazelle's trade show data. So the trade show feature is extremely valuable and it can be used in many different ways. So let's say you're attending a trade show. You can use the tool to complement your physical attendance. But if you're unable to attend a show, you can use the tool to research and connect with the exhibiting companies. You can also use the tool to plan what shows you'd like to attend in the upcoming months. So any user could request a trade show and our data team will get it added to the platform. So how it works is by seeing those trade shows that other EDOs are interested in them and others are requesting it. One of the most common use cases for the trade show feature is when a client is preparing to attend a trade show. So we know there's a strong correlation between a company's attendance in trade shows and their likeliness to expand. Companies spend a lot of time and money to travel and exhibit at these shows, and most shows have hundreds or even thousands of exhibiting companies. So it's hard to prioritize and decide who you'd like to spend your time booking meetings with. Using Gazelle, you could add additional filters like G-score, funding, add a specific industry or sector, and then narrow down that list of exhibitors so that you can have a really targeted and successful outreach approach. So right now, I'm helping one of my accounts prepare to attend Automate, taking place in Chicago this May. There's a total of 600 exhibitors on the list. So they weren't sure how to go about it, who to reach out to, and they just don't have the bandwidth to research 600 companies and reach out to every single one of them. So what I've done for them is I've helped them break it down into two smaller lists. One list is focused on companies that have received VC funding in the past 24 months. So by applying the VC funding filter, I narrowed this list down to 36 companies. So that's 36 out of the 600 companies. When you go into each company that has received funding, on the company profile, you'll be able to see information like how much funding they've received, when the last time they received funding was, the total funding, what type of funding, was it pre-seed, was it Series D funding, and who the investors are. And we're updating our funding data regularly through Crunchbase, so it's always up to date and you could always see who has received that funding recently. It's really helpful to know ahead of time before meeting with companies who has received funding and what the finances are like. Now, the second list I helped them curate is using our G score. So I selected companies with a G score of 4 to 6, and that indicates 65% potential of growth or higher. So by adding this, it narrows it down even further. So now I have curated two lists for them, one of companies with a high G score and another one for companies that have received VC funding. So that's a total of 101 out of the 600 exhibitors. So of course, it's a lot easier to try to connect with and do research on 101 companies and get meetings with those. It allows you to really strategize and plan for the trade show and have a more focused approach before attending. And then we have some contacts in there under each exhibitor. You'll be able to see LinkedIn profiles, and your account manager works really closely with you on preparing for all of this. So if you ever need any help, just reach out to us and we could help you with your approach. We've even put together some LinkedIn messages for some clients when they need help with that. So definitely take advantage of that. All right, so as Nathan discussed, developer has lots of different ways and different reports that could be used for business attraction. Right now, we'll focus on a feature that's had significant attention recently from users, and that's our company talent profile. So the company talent profile provides you with an overview of a company with data relating to the type of jobs it employs, the jobs it's hiring for, and talent competitors. It allows you to understand the companies you're targeting and what their needs are, and it allows you to make compelling arguments as to why your region is the best fit for this company. So if we look at Aerotech as an example, using the company talent profile, we're able to see where they're located and what their employee talent currently looks like. This will allow you to measure that against your local labor market supply and demand. We could also see what companies are supplying or drawing talent from Aerotech, and this analyzes the profiles of past and current employees at the selected companies. We're also able to see job posting trends and what they look like over time to help us understand where an employer wants to be in the future. And then to the left, you could see the type of skills the company needs their talent to possess. So the type of skills can illustrate where a company is trying to go and how they intend to get there. You could compare this to the type of skill set you have within your region and include that in your value proposition to a company that you're trying to reach out to. So throughout the developer platform, users have the opportunity to leverage a lot of significant skills data. Understanding the skills of a company needs is a strategic avenue to show the synergies between their needed skills and the skills your region possesses. So the report is meant to give users an understanding of a company's needs, and we want our users to have that data to allow them to be proactive in their business attraction efforts. So instead of asking a company what they need and what they're looking for, you already have the data and you already know what they need. So you could speak to their demands and speak to how those needs will be addressed and met with your region's talent pipeline. Developer, we try to provide the data to help the regions paint the most compelling story to why they're the best fit for a certain company. So it really gives you that competitive advantage when you are speaking to companies, because you know that other EDOs are also approaching them. So you really need to build that strong proposition for yourself. Now looking at our third tool, eIMPACT. So I'm using a client example here, the town of Camp Verde in Arizona. They use eIMPACT to engage a wide-ranging audience. They like to display it for site selectors, to the public, to city council. They've told us they think it's really important to give them something to go off that's high level, contemporary, and shows the community in a positive light. And the eIMPACT dashboard allows them to have data visualizations, engage with site selectors, inform the city council of any data they'd like to share, and it ensures that you keep your data current and up to date. Also, you're able to measure and keep track of your region's progress with the dashboards. So those are three use cases and examples from each one of the three tools that we presented. And as you can imagine, there's different ways that these tools could complement each other for business attraction efforts. And we really will, like, as I mentioned, we're able to work with you, help you strategize different ways to use all three tools together to ensure that you're getting the most out of it and finding as much success as possible when it comes to business attraction. And that will be all. Thank you, everyone, for listening. You'll all be getting a pop up shortly about taking a quick poll. And Nathan and I will be able to answer some questions. So I know there's some in the chat that we will review with you. Thank you, Nathan. Let's see.
So we can start. Let's start by like answering this question about cost. We got a few questions in here about what does the cost of these products look like. Um, it's kind of a difficult question to answer on here. I'll be honest, because these different tools have different features in them that you can add or remove, and a lot of it is based on how many users you want to have access to. So if you're interested in cost, I would highly recommend on that poll that asks if you'd like us to reach out, just say yes on that, and we can pop on a call with you, and we can learn a little bit more about what you're interested in, and we can help provide cost. But one thing that I do want to mention is that one of the powers of us, or one of the nice things about us having these three separate tools all under the Lightcast umbrella, is that we actually can bundle these different tools. And we can start to really work on the pricing to make it fit your budget and fit your community. And so we can really work on bundling these different things together to help your organization. Um, I see another question in here from John. It looks like he asked, "What goes into choosing which tool to use?" That's a great question, and so we'll kind of work with you alongside you to help you understand what your community might need right now. Some people might not quite be ready for proactive business attraction, and so maybe step one is working on RFI response. How can we respond to these RFIs in the most effective way? And so probably the best way to understand which tool is best is to come talk to us, and we can work with you and see what are your current initiatives. What is your region currently set up to do? Do you have the people to do proactive business attraction, or do you have the people to do RFI response? And so if you come talk to us, we can really help you work through that and um, yeah, get that figured out. Awesome. Let's see what other questions we have here.
There's one about the Canadian market. Is this available for the Canadian market? And yes, all our tools are available in the Canadian market. We have several different Canadian organizations that use all of our tools. Um, so definitely.
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, we do have all of these tools like the law said in Canada. We actually use the what we would call like the sister tool to developer in Canada. It's called our analyst platform, and it looks a little bit different on like what types of data are available and how we present that data, but it is available, so we'd be happy to chat more about that as well. Let's see here. Awesome. Is eIMPACT an added cost to an ongoing subscription? Yeah, so if you're currently a developer subscriber or a Gazelle subscriber, this is a separate subscription. But like I mentioned, we can bundle these costs to help get you some discounts on them. So you can actually bring in eIMPACT and add it to your subscription. So we can add it to your current subscription at a discounted price. Awesome. Let's see. Are there any other questions for us? We'll give it another minute here. And if there's no other questions, we can end a little bit early.
There's
Um, oh, yeah, there's a question about who is using this package right now within Canada. Yeah, we have quite a few different organizations that kind of use different sets of it, or we have some organizations that use all three. One example is the county of Grand Prairie in Alberta. They actually currently use all three. So they have the Analyst, the Gazelle platform, and then they actually just added eIMPACT to their subscription. So if you know Jordan Tidy, I would highly suggest reaching out to him. You can tell him that I told you to bug him. If you don't know him, I'm happy to introduce you to him. But that's one example. But really, we work with a lot of different organizations because we work with Invest Ontario, Invest Quebec, and a wide variety of other organizations that are utilizing our tools for this business attraction. Dewal, do you have anyone you want to add there?
Honestly, there are a lot. I've worked with a lot of the Canadian organizations, from trade teams to investment attraction teams that are provincial or at a city level across Ontario, Saskatchewan, PEI. So there are a lot. And if you're ever interested in specific references, reach out to us. We could send them to you. So I don't share all of them, but we could put you in touch with all of them if you'd ever like to connect with any of them.
And Dewal's actually a Canadian, so she really understands the Canadian market.
Yes, I'm in Toronto, so definitely reach out if you have any questions about the Canadian market.
Awesome.
Any other questions?
Looks like we've gotten everything answered, so we'll go ahead and end a few minutes early here. It looks like if you hurry, you can go catch the end of the BYU game. So, thank you so much, everyone, for joining today. We really appreciate you coming to learn a little bit more about our products. We're happy to chat with you more, so feel free to reach out to us if you want to learn more.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.